Good morning to everybody. This is Alex Warren Rodriguez speaking from New York. We are going to start this webinar to discuss, to talk about the support to voluntary national reviews for the 2030 agenda and all the different bits and pieces that come with that. My name, again, is Alex Warren Rodriguez. I'm a policy advisor with UN DOCO. DOCO, for those of you who don't know, it's the Development Operations Coordination Office. We are the office in the UN that is responsible for coordinating the development part of the system. We support the work of the UNDG globally, and then we also provide support to colleagues in the field through the work that we do with Western coordinators, Western coordinator offices, and then also UN country teams. The purpose of today is to have a conversation on the follow-up and review process for the SDGs. As you probably all know, this is a key piece in the 2030 agenda architecture. It is the mechanism that exists at the various levels to get countries to review progress on the implementation of the 2030 agenda and also discuss which is the way forward in achieving the SDGs by 2030. We believe this is a very good time to discuss, to have this webinar, and I believe that the very high level of interest and participation to this webinar attests to that. It's important because there's a number of things happening. Here in the UNDG, we've just issued a set of guidelines to help colleagues in the field to support member states to prepare national SDG country-level reports. It's also important, there's a right time because we are now moving towards the second HLPF of the SDG era, which will take place in July this year. And I know there's a lot of interest from member states who are, I think there's up to 40 or 40 plus member states who will be coming here to New York to report on a voluntary basis on what have they achieved on the SDGs. In addition to the HLPF in July, we also have now in the next few weeks, we'll be having the first round of regional sustainable development forums. I believe the first one will be taking place in the Asia-Pacific region, and then you have all the other regions happening. And then finally also, because there's still a lot of interest from what we see from the communication, the feedback that we're getting in the field, there's a lot of interest on the SDG indicator framework. How do we translate this global framework into national indicators? So it is in this context that we thought that we'd organize this webinar, and we have a number of speakers here who will be speaking to each of these issues that I've just outlined. We will start the webinar with a presentation from a colleague from DESA, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York, Fred Soltau. Fred is part of the team who is managing the high-level political forum here in New York and providing support to the preparation of voluntary national reports. So we will start off with a presentation on that topic. We will then move on to a short presentation on the regional dimension, and for that we have our colleague Ahmed Noor, who is the director or head of the Office of the Regional Economic Commissions here in New York. Following that, we will have a colleague from UNDP, Babatunde Omilola, to present these guidelines that we just produced on how to support member states in the preparation of country-led SDG national reports. And finally, we will have a colleague from the Statistical Division, Yongyi Ming, who has been leading with her colleagues all the work on the preparation of the SDG indicator framework and also providing advice to member states on how to adapt that global indicator framework to national framework. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the webinar into two parts. We will start off with 4 presentations by these colleagues. That shouldn't take us more than maybe 40 minutes. And then after that, we will open the floor, so to speak, for a Q&A session. Now, for the Q&A, what we're going to do, what we're going to ask you is to send us in writing your questions. And for that, I believe you have a box on the top right-hand corner of your computer where you can actually type in your questions for the presenters, and then we'll just read them out and see how much we can cover in terms of all the questions that come in. There's already how many people right now? 122. So I believe we're not going to be able to respond all the questions, but what we'll do is we'll keep a record of them, and then we'll see how we can provide answers in the form of a written Q&A to all of you who are participating here and other colleagues who might be interested in this topic. And in any case, at least in the case of DOCO, we operate in an open door policy, and I believe I probably speak on behalf of all the colleagues around here. If in the next few days, weeks, months, you have any questions on these issues, just please get in touch with us, send us an email, give us a call, and we will be happy to follow up. So having said that, without further ado, I will hand over the floor to Fred Soltau to tell us a bit about the HLPF and the voluntary national review reporting process linked to the HLPF process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and good morning to all of the colleagues, and of course good afternoon, depending where you are. So I was asked to say a few words about the HLPF preparatory process and how this links into the VNRs and to the broader question of national review and review globally also of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. So what is the HLPF? The HLPF is the high-level political forum on sustainable development, and it's tasked as being the center of lying at the center of a network of review at the global level for the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. So it's meant to be sort of at the apex of other review bodies and sort of the central locus for review activities at the global level. And the Agenda 2030 foresees review at the global level through the HLPF, through various other UN bodies, functional commissions that are part of the intergovernmental machinery at the UN, the Functional Commission of ECOSOC dealing with social issues and other topics. It also foresees regional level review depending on the regional structure of the region in question. So the different UN regions have different dynamics, but the idea is that they are also encouraged to engage in review activities. And then, of course, very, very importantly, at the national level, because, of course, implementation takes place primarily at the national level. Countries have responsibility for their own development, and therefore the review and follow-up at the national level is critical. So that's a bit of the background on the HLPF. Let's go to the voluntary national reviews themselves. The first set of reviews, the inaugural reviews, took place in 2016, and we had 22 countries that volunteered and conducted their reviews. And what does this entail? This really entails a national process of review of the SDGs, of review involving stakeholders. And for this process and for this activity, the Secretary General prepared a set of voluntary guidelines. Now, those guidelines are really for the purpose of comparability. They're quite short, about 4 pages. They're referenced in the national SDG reporting guidelines for the country teams that were mentioned earlier by Alexander. They are these SDGs guidelines are really there to help structure the country reporting when they come to the HLPF. So we have a comparability. So because these reports that countries, when they come to the HLPF, they do 2 things. One, they give an oral presentation of 15 minutes, which is the highlight really of their national review process, their priorities, their lessons they've learned, what they want to share with their peers in the HLPF about their review and what they've achieved and where they've perceived to be blockages and obstacles. So that's a sort of a short political. At the highest level, we've had ministers. We had a Prime Minister of Norway that was among the countries, and she presented Norway's VNR. But behind it, of course, is a lot of work at the national level, and that work is encapsulated in the report, the written report that countries make available, and which becomes a public record of the country's review. And I think that's of particular value because it makes public the review process. It puts on record the country's position, and in fact sets a baseline, because the idea is that countries would, over the period of implementation of the agenda from 2015 up to 2030, go to prepare a review more than once, maybe 2 or 3 times. There's no legislative mandate requiring or even guiding it, but the idea is that countries would undergo a voluntary national review more than once. For those that are interested, I'd highly recommend to you the synthesis of the 2016 VNRs that was prepared by some colleagues, which really tries to tease out and draw out the highlights of these reports, because reading them all is perhaps a worthwhile task, but a very challenging task. And that kind of brings anyone wants a quick study, a quick entry to see what these countries have reported on, what are some of the main threads, what are some of the capacity development challenges they've identified, that can be found in the synthesis report. So up to then let's forward to 2017. This year we've had 43 countries, and if we move to our second slide, it'll give you a breakdown of the regions. So these are the UN political regions groupings. We can see Latin America has really stepped forward, but a fairly good presentation of countries from all regions, and in fact 43 countries, of course, is almost double the 2016 number of countries conducting national reviews. It also means that by the end of the review cycle in 2017, we would have reviewed about a third of the UN member states, which is quite an achievement. But again, it's not so much the quantity, it's the quality that counts. And here I want to say that a successful VNR at the HRPF really rests on a strong, thorough, and robust national review. Because, from the overall perspective, really what you want is strong national review. That's what counts. And in a sense, coming to the HRPF is the icing on the cake. It's the apex of a review process. And you may find countries can be very thoroughly conducting national reviews without ever coming to the HRPF. That's perfectly fine. The idea is not that countries rush forward to come to the HRPF. That is one dimension of the follow-up and review and architecture of the Agenda 2030. But it's one sort of, as I said, sort of a culmination, but rests really on the shoulders of strong national review carried out with stakeholder involvement and with some of the points which are highlighted in the reporting guidelines that we'll discuss a bit later on. As I said, I mentioned the importance also for the global level of the Secretary General's reporting guidelines. These are really, as I said, for comparability. So we can compare this year's reports with last year's and those in the future. They are voluntary. Countries can report in any format that they wish. This is an open and voluntary process, but the idea is that they would follow certain structural guidelines when they prepare their reports and submit them to us at the HRPF. I then want to just raise a few issues that have come up. I think if we're assisting countries with the preparation of these reviews, what have we heard so far? We heard a lot about data. Countries have told us over and over again, and if we look at the 2016 reports, the trouble they've had with data, with this challenge of the disaggregation level required by the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, that doing this, establishing baselines, national baselines, is a challenge. They've also spoken about the work they've done in so-called gap analysis, trying to see how their national policy framework stacks up against the SDGs. Are there gaps? Where are the gaps in their policy framework, in the legislative framework? That's been an activity we see that they've reported on. Countries also reporting on the importance of stakeholder participation, but also that it's not easy, that some countries don't have built-in mechanisms, coordination councils or mechanisms to deal with and involve civil society. That is a challenge for countries. It's also time-consuming. So they've reported to us that there's pressure in the available time to do a thorough and useful consultation with stakeholders. So these are some of the messages that are coming out from countries as they're reporting. And there are other highlights which are contained in the synthesis report of the 2016 reviews that I mentioned, that contain some information on what countries, the obstacles they identified, and the capacity development needs. Because one idea we have too is that these reports are really a source that can be mined for countries' self-identification of where their capacity development needs lie. That's actually a resource for many persons, but also for us in the UN system trying to work on capacity development. Maybe just on my last slide, which is just an overview of the process. We will have coming up in early March a preparatory meeting with the 43 volunteering countries to kind of a prep meeting. This is focused very much on the HRPF. We'll be taking them through some of the requirements of the reporting. We'll be having them sort of take a status check of where they are in their preparation. So this is quite I would say, like the focus is very much on bringing them to the HRPF. But in this process, we hear a lot about the things I mentioned earlier: data, problems with stakeholder participation. So that our focus in these meetings is really, in a sense, shepherding them towards and assisting them as much as we can to prepare their VNRs. Then we have a range of regional meetings. Now, these are meetings organized in conjunction with the regional commissions, and a colleague will say a few more words about that. And then we come then to the HLPF. One deadline that countries have is the submission of what we call main messages, in a sense the headline messages from the preparatory process, and those should be due by 19th of May. And then the final report, hopefully by the 16th of June, that countries would by then have available and make available the final report, which is placed on the website of the Division for Sustainable Development of DESA, and is available hopefully in advance, so other countries and stakeholders, civil society, can review these reports and be well prepared. And we hope that then at the HLPF there's an exchange, because as I should have said, and I want to just finish on this point, is that the idea for the VNRs at the HLPF is not a finger-pointing exercise or a dragging anyone through the mud. The idea is to highlight the lessons learned, it's to exchange the lessons learned, to identify challenges, and obviously to do that in a way which is backed up by data. So the reports should be well backed by data and properly sourced. But at the HLPF, there's the idea that it's an exchange of views. It's not a finger-pointing exercise. And we do hope it's also a dialogue between member states and a strong involvement of civil society. So the civil society actors are actually able to pose questions to the member states after the presentation. Now I'll leave it there, and hopefully look forward to answering your questions later in our webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. That was a very informative presentation on the HLPF, sort of a chapeau presentation. Just some ideas that I thought were very interesting. First, the HLPF is at the apex of the follow-up and review framework. So it's sort of, in a way, the end point. But by being at the apex, it means that it's part of a bigger system. And it heavily relies on the similar work undertaken at the regional level and also at the country level. So it's important that we see this as an interlinked process. A second key idea is this idea that this is a voluntary process. It's member states voluntarily coming here to New York to present on the HLPF. And this is where the UN, at all levels, here in New York, regionally, at the country level, we have to do our best and use our power of persuasion, convening power, to get member states to engage in this process, and also to get them to, to follow the guidelines that are provided globally and at the country level, so that we can ensure consistency in reporting and reviewing, consistency across countries, but also consistency over time. And also encourage our member states to do this in an open participatory process. So this is where we have to come and use our regular engagement with government to encourage them to proceed this way. And then one final thought is this idea that this is not only, and I think this is probably at all levels, global, regional, and country level. We shouldn't see this as purely monitoring and backward-looking reviewing. Clearly, we're looking back at progress in implementing the 2030 agenda, but we do this to have a policy dialogue that we can, at the country level, regional, global level, share experiences and draw the way forward with the SDG implementation. So it's forward-looking as well. It's about policy dialogue, not only purely reporting on progress. And just finally, before I hand over to my colleague here from the Regional Commission, just encourage everybody to go to the DESA website on sustainable development. It's sustainabledevelopment.un.org/HLPF. It's highly informative. You get everything there. You get, for every year, you get all the background documents, submissions that were provided by member states, and you also have the analysis that came out of last year's HLPF. So we seriously encourage you to go there as a first port of call if you are interested in the HLPF, because you'll get all the information that you need there, I believe. So having said that, let me just maybe hand over to Amr Noor from the Regional Economic Commissions to tell us a bit about the regional dimensions, what is happening there, and what can we expect.
Thank you very much, Alex, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Actually, I'll just take a few seconds to pick up on what you said, because I fully agree with many of your last observations, actually, and especially the issue of that. I mean, the importance in the VNRs, for instance, all right, it's not, and we spoke about member states about that, and we were just in retreats about that. And many member states emphasize that the value added of the VNRs is not really the 15 minutes presentation at the apex of HLPF, which of course is glamorous and it's important, of course, and everything, but it's really the process in which they learn, all right, and they even learn internally as well at the country level, essentially, actually, all right, so many things related to the policy issues, but related to the institutional aspects as well, all right, to implement better the 2030 agenda and put their house in order in a way. So I would totally second that, and I think that really obviously speaks to the country level importance, which is really the first foundation of the implementation of the 2030 agenda. Having said that, I would just very quickly move immediately to the regional forums on sustainable development, which, as you said, this is kind of part of a bigger architecture of supporting the implementation and the follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda. The Regional Forum of Sustainable Development actually have been conceived immediately after the Rio +20 conference, actually, in which the commissions were given a mandate by member states to already think about the upcoming Sustainable Development Agenda and the post-2015 at that time and so on. And then this mandate was obviously reaffirmed after that in various resolutions, including in the outcome document of the 2030 Agenda and so on. So we are currently now actually, the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development are being held in all the 5 regions, all right, with the 5 regional commissions. They are at different pace and at different kind of iterations, if you wish. As a matter of fact, in the Asia Pacific and in the Arab region for 2017, we're going to have the 4th iteration of the respective Forum on Sustainable Development, the 2nd iteration in, actually the 3rd iteration in Africa, and the 2nd in UNECE, and the 1st actually in Latin America and Caribbean. They are all coming, as Alex has alluded to, actually, they're going to start by the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development at the end of March, and then by the last week of April, we're going to have both the UNECE and ECLAC forums on sustainable development, and then in May, actually, we're going to have them in Africa and in the Arab world. Now, they are all conceived now through the experience of the years, and there is kind of a convergence, if you wish, on the design and organizations of this regional forum on sustainable development to achieve their main purpose, which is really kind of peer learning and supporting of implementation of the 2030 agenda. So we have, if you wish, 4 major segments, if you wish, to cover in all the regional forum on sustainable development. The first one of them, obviously, is founded on the voluntary national reviews. Most of this regional forum on sustainable development are actually going to be, if you wish, the first sounding platforms for the voluntary national reviews in the respective regions. And as I say, the purpose here is really not to duplicate or to kind of substitute, obviously, these reviews at the HLPF, but actually to enrich, if you wish, these voluntary national reviews and achieve the purpose of peer learning among the countries of the regions on several aspects. And to achieve this, actually, the thinking is that most of these voluntary national reviews are going to be kind of structured in an interactive manner, actually, guided by the experience of those countries of the region who have undertaken already some of these VNRs in previous year, like last year, for instance, in the region and so on. And they're going to be kind of structured about some very substantive elements so that it kind of promotes the skill learning, including, for instance, the institutional arrangements, the data and statistics, the gender dimension, the obviously the regional context and perspectives, which are actually part of the enrichment of this VNRs at the regional level, localization of the SDGs, and also the means of implementation. So around this kind of substantive elements, the kind of interactive dialogue among the countries of the regions is going to be held with the purpose of the peer learning and broadening the scope, actually, of the VNRs moving forward after that to the... we're also going to build on the VNRs to try, actually, through identifying gaps, to try, actually, also to kind of try to match among the stakeholders how to address some of these gaps at the regional level. So this is the kind of first segment, as I say. For that, there's going to be regional workshops for the VNRs, as kind of alluded, which are going to be organized and led by the regional commission with all our partners, obviously, including DESA, but mainly here with the UN country teams and the regional UNDGs, actually. So that we would like their involvement very much in the regional workshops of the VNRs, actually, to have a bottom-up approach to the HLPF on that aspect. So this is kind of the first segment. The second segment actually is going to be, if you wish, the horizontal segment or the regional progress assessments of the 2030 agenda, including the SDGs. And at the heart of this segment, if you wish, is going to be the regional progress reports, which are being prepared by the regional commissions, actually, with their partners, including the multilateral development banks, and also depending on either the whole system, actually, including through the regional coordination mechanism, is going to be mobilized for that particular section. And this is the segment where really the regional priorities and specificities are going to be addressed, but also where the various nexuses, all right, depending on the priority of each region, is going to be addressed. That includes, for instance, the conflict development nexus, the humanitarian development nexus, the sustainable development, sustaining peace nexus, all right, and also the regional integration and the sustainable development nexus. So this is actually in that segment the focus of it from that perspective. The third segment, obviously, after that is going to be what we will call the thematic segment, which really kind of achieves this regional global nexus, if you wish, to the HLPF. And that's going to be framed basically around the regional perspectives on the global theme that has been identified in HLPF, all right? And we're still thinking how best to address this, but there's different approaches that are being perceived to do this on several aspects, whether through the 3 dimensions of sustainable development or just addressing the most pertinent drivers of change, if you wish, to that theme at the regional level. So this is for the thematic segment. And as part of that segment, probably, we are also going to see how we can emphasize the sets of goals that has been identified, if you wish, to address through the member states' request to kind of give some more in-depth review of some sets of goals, but that could also be done in the regional segment, if you wish, or the regional assessment segment, by putting some more emphasis on these goals. So that's the fourth segment is actually going to be the means of implementation segment, all right? And this is obviously going to be, as I said, it's going to address the means of implementation from a cross-cutting regional perspective. It will, as I said, build mainly on largely on the VNR segment in terms of the gaps identified in practice at the country level and so on, but also it will touch on the broader regional and global context as well as the challenges and the opportunities to mobilize the means of implementation in the region. And part of that, as I said, we are hoping to have this kind of matchmaking role to address some of the gaps identified at the country level from that perspective. Let me end up by saying only one thing which also kind of cross-cut all the segments is partnerships. Partnerships is very important actually for the Regional Forum of Sustainable Development. We are committed to it at the regional commissions. It's going to be inclusive. It's an inclusive platform for everybody. I mentioned already the emphasis on the UN country teams and regional UNDG in the VNR segment, for instance. We are doing the same thing with the regional partners, non-UN regional organization and sub-regional organization and multilateral development banks in the regional assessment part, all right, working with DESTA for the HLPF, for the thematic segment and so on, and also working with the MDBs and IFIs for the means of implementation and so on, and working closely with the specialized agencies in those cluster of, or the sets of SDGs that has been identified. And we are also having, in many regions, a back-to-back forum of civil society with the Regional Forum of Sustainable Development, which we are working with this and others, obviously, to organize as well. So I leave it here due to time constraints, but I will be very open, obviously, to any follow-up and Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, for, again, a very informative presentation on what is happening at the regional level. Just some key highlights. Your first point, a very good one. Highlight this is a process, a living process. It's, as we said before, it was an architecture, it was at various levels, but we need to see this as a sort of up and down process where we form the HLPF through the discussions that happen at the regional level and at the country level, and then that feeds back again, I guess, to the country level and informs national policy making. A second point, this is the regional level provides the first sounding platform, sounding board for the VNR and the HLPF process, and I think this is critical. As you were saying, it enriches voluntary national reports at the HLPF. But I also see from my own experiences, I think member states appreciate the regional level because they're able to discuss things with countries which are sharing similar concerns, similar issues, where there's regular engagement at the regional level. So that is it's a good starting point, a good platform to go then to the HLPF. And finally, this idea that it's about there's a lot of peer learning at that regional level. So again, as I was encouraging before to reach out to the website of DESA on sustainable development, I would encourage colleagues working at the field level to reach out to the regional levels of the UN, whether it's regional economic commissions, whether it's the regional UNDGs, the regional offices of individual entities. I believe there's a lot of capacity, a lot of knowledge there, and sort of working together we can make this happen more effectively. So having said this, I will now hand over to my colleague here, Babatunde Omilola from UNDP, to present this country-led guidelines for SDG country reporting, which the UNDG has been working on for the last year, and which presents a bit how we see we could support member states to do regular review on SDG implementation. So Babatunde, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues, wherever you are all over the world. In terms of this particular presentation, I want to structure it into maybe 3 categories. One is basically to tell you what we did during the MDG era in terms of the fact that we are not starting from the scratch. We have a baseline to actually work with. Then the second is to take you through quickly the content of the SDG country reporting guidelines. And then thirdly, to talk about some of the useful annexes that are in the guidelines that will help you to support countries in preparing their SDG country reports. Let me go through the first one. In terms of during the MDG era, we supported around 156 countries to produce about 550 MDG reports. And these reports were useful for policy dialogue at the country level. They were also useful to hold government accountable for what they were doing in their different countries. And for us to be able to support countries to produce these reports between 2001 and 2015, we actually produced 4 different sets of guidelines in 2001, in 2003, 2009, as well as 2013. Without going through the content of those guidelines, it's important to basically mention that the guidelines were revised based on the context around that particular point in time. For instance, the guidelines in 2013 were produced to deal with issues around inequality analysis, going beyond averages and breaking down silos in different countries. And so after all of that, one of the things that we witnessed during the MDG era was that there was high level of ownership and localization of the MDG indicators. Despite the fact that we had 60 official indicators to track the progress of the 8 MDGs during that era, many countries actually used up to close to 1,200 MDG indicators, which were usually, many of them were locally constructed. They were national indicators, which were actually used to track the progress of the MDGs. That was during the MDG era. Now, going back now to coming to the SDG era, where we are now, we have produced this particular SDG country reporting guidelines, which have 4 chapters. And I'm going to take you through what each chapter contains very, very briefly. In terms of chapter 1, we actually focused on what we call follow-up review and review processes by looking at how SDG country reports can be linked with all the other reviews taking place at the national level, the national voluntary report that we've heard about, the regional SDG reports, as well as at the global level. That's about what it actually contained in chapter 1 of the reporting guidelines. The reporting guidelines also show in chapter 1 some of the thematic reviews that might be necessary for countries to actually focus on. And when you look at some of those guidelines, you will see that the whole idea of producing national reporting guidelines and also now producing SDG country reports will be to actually focus on the universal, the agenda, to make sure that the agenda, to see how the interrelated goals are within the agenda, but also to ensure open, inclusive, participatory, and transparent processes for all people in their different countries. But more importantly, it's about how to have accountability so that you have mutual accountability between governments and their citizens, and you have accountability between the different organs of government, between the legislative arm and the executive arm of government. That's what you have in Chapter 1 of the guidelines. In Chapter 2, we basically focused on going through what the principles governing the Agenda 2030 are in terms of the universality agenda, leaving no one behind, the integrated agenda, national ownership. But more importantly, we presented what should be the building blocks of a national SDG review at the country level. And in terms of the building blocks, there are things that are really very important. It's about cooperation and collaboration among government agencies and ministries. It's about facilitating comparability across and within countries. It's also about creating opportunities for capacity development at the country level, as well as making sure that national statistical offices in different countries play the coordination role that they need to play in order to have inclusive national policy dialogue around whether countries are making progress vis-a-vis Agenda 2030 and the different goals. One thing that is important in Chapter 2 is to actually say how to foster the generation and use of quality, accessible, timely, reliable, and disaggregated data to be able to monitor progress that countries are making. In Chapter 3, the guidelines basically revealed what the SDG indicators are, the data, and actually how to make reviews based on progress that countries are making. Here in Chapter 3, the guidelines look through how to construct national indicators, what should the baseline be, and we are suggesting that the baseline should be for countries that actually were part of the MDG era, should use their MDG data as their baseline data, the last reports that they produce in the different countries. We also think that a mapping exercise is the crucial starting point to help ensure a more systematic, inclusive, and integrated approach to the implementation of national SDG indicators. And we think all of these are important for Chapter 3. For Chapter 4 of the report, we basically felt that it would be important to let colleagues know who and how to engage with colleagues in different countries and what to do, how to identify relevant stakeholders and forums for engagement, and also how to encourage inclusive approaches. One of the things that we highlighted here was what was presented in Finland in terms of an SDG scorecard, whereby in Finland already what they are trying to do is to show across the 17 goals where they already have excellent starting level point, and where they have moderate, and then also where they are really, really poor in terms of what to be done. So in terms of Chapter 4 of the guidelines, we basically said it would be important to have logical starting points for engagement, which can arise where national multi-stakeholder bodies already exist, or where planning commissions operate in collaboration with multi-stakeholder forums. We also basically talk about tripartite social dialogue structures between government, businesses, and workers that can serve as platforms for more comprehensive implementation and accountability mechanisms. So there are some practical steps that we have suggested in terms of who and how to engage. I will go through them very quickly. Number one is setting up a stakeholder steering committee at the country level as the first step in preparing an inclusive country-led SDG report. Number two is outsourcing background research to local researchers who understand local needs and challenges and can also design local solutions. Number three is establishing a multi-stakeholder review group to synthesize research findings in a balanced way and produce a coherent first draft of the National SDG Review Report. And the fourth practical step, which is also very critical, is organizing multi-stakeholder consultations and workshops to obtain feedback on the draft report at the country level and then validate its findings, as well as to design the best dissemination strategy. We also think it's important at the country level to develop an advocacy plan, which will be a core component of an inclusive national SDG review process. And that should have 3 stages: promoting the consultations leading to the development of the report, disseminating the report's results, and backing implementation of key recommendations. And it's also important to leverage different forms of media, from radio stations to online forums, which can help broaden engagement around SDG review and follow-up processes. We also think it's important to actually embrace new technologies in terms of how we disseminate SDG reports at the country level. In terms of annexes, we have 4 annexes in this particular guidelines. I will just briefly touch upon what each annex contains. Annex 1 outlines analytical approaches that could support the preparation of SDG country reports, including trend analysis, budget analysis, environment impact analysis, and many other similar approaches. Annex 2 discusses the value of communication, dissemination advocacy, developing an action advocacy plan, defining and reaching great target audiences, selecting the right channels to reach audiences, and implementing the advocacy plan. In Annex 3 of the guidelines, you will see a checklist for preparing an SDG report, what you need to do at the country level to actually prepare an SDG report. Annex 4 provides a sample of sources, guidance, and tools available to support SDG reporting across all the 17 SDGs, in terms of where you can actually go to, in terms of sources, in terms of guidance, in terms of information on how to prepare SDG country reports. Finally, let me say that we have already seen some countries that are making significant progress in terms of trying to look at their data availability assessment. One good example is Indonesia, where they are basically trying to see what data they have available and looking at what national indicators they're going to use and what the global indicators will be, and then comparing all of these to see how to actually localize the agenda in Indonesia. That's a very good example. Another example is from Colombia, where they are trying to look at their performance indicator dashboards to see how to monitor the SDGs and looking at what they have in terms of the monitoring indicators. And as I said earlier on, another example is the example of Finland, where basically they are trying to see whether they can score each of the SDGs and see where they already have data, where they already have indicators, and then see where the gaps are. So overall, I think the SDG guidelines are very useful. We consider them to be the guidelines to be a living document that we can review as we move along in the process of implementing the SDGs. But what is important to know is that all of these processes feed into one another. The SDG country reports are expected to feed into the preparation of the national voluntary reports. They are also expected to feed into the regional SDG reports that will be produced, and then also feed into the global SDG report. But more importantly, I think the guidelines are useful in a way that when countries produce their SDG national reports, they can have opportunities to have mutual accountability, inclusive policy dialogue, and be analytical and see where things are going well in the different countries and where things are not going well, and then see how to actually correct mistakes as we move along in the process of implementing the SDGs. So I will stop here, and of course, questions are welcome, and hopefully we'll be able to provide answers to many of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Babatunde, for a very comprehensive presentation on these guidelines which have just come out on how to support country-level SDG reporting. Just some key, I mean, it's a very comprehensive presentation. There's a lot there. We should see these guidelines as resources that we're making available to colleagues in the field, almost as a resource book or a reference guide with material, with links, with background readings. We're going to make available this presentation after we've completed the webinar, so you can have a look at all the very nice graphs and all the data that Babatunde presented. But the guidelines are already available on the UNDG website. They're available on an interim basis. We hope to have them fully endorsed by the UNDG in a couple of weeks' time, but they're there for you to download, and hopefully we'll be able to put it in a more user-friendly platform that follows this idea of making them a living document, that feeds from experiences taking place in the field. Just a couple of takeaways from Babatunde's presentation. Critical, we're not starting from zero, we're not starting from scratch. There's a lot of expertise actually in the system and supporting similar type of review during the MDG era. More than 500 national MDG reports, that is a lot. And I encourage you to have a look at, I think it's in the UNDP website, not sure where, just type in the search engine, MDG reporter, you'll go to all the reports that are there. And it's a good starting point. If you want to see how to do a national SDG report, let's see what we did during the MDG era. Another key takeaway, we see SDG review and reporting at the country level as a regular process, as part of policy making, regular policy making. And maybe here's a bit the difference between Fred's initial presentation on the HLPF. Fred mentioned that probably countries will be participating twice, I don't know, maybe 3 times during the SDG era, here in New York, presenting the voluntary national reports. That's great. It's a way of showcasing what countries are doing to the world. But we believe that if this is going to happen, this should be built on regular reporting, regular review, regular dialogue on the SDGs. And this is what these guidelines are encouraging member states to do, and hopefully we'll provide the resources for you to work with member states on these issues. Then just one final point, and this is repeating a bit what I mentioned before. We see national review processes not purely only as monitoring, getting data points and saying, oh, where are we on the SDGs, but we see this as a process. Again, speaking on what Am just said before, it's a process of that should be, we should encourage member states to have it as an open participatory process where countries, citizens learn where they are on the SDGs, have a policy dialogue around it, and draw out the way forward in terms of implementing the SDGs by 2030. So with that said, let me just now hand over to the last presentation by Young-Yi from the Statistical Division, who will tell us a bit about the SDG indicator framework. I know at least colleagues with whom I interact, and there's many in the field, are very interested in this topic. It's still a burning issue, so hopefully we'll be able to provide some clarification on some of the concepts. Young-Yi?
Thank you, Alex. Good morning and good afternoon, colleagues everywhere. So I would like to give a little history and background on the global indicator and the work currently carried out by this interagency and expert group on SDG indicator. So you may know that the Statistical Division of DESA is the secretary of this IEG SDG group. And so this group was established by the Statistical Commission in 2015 with the task of developing and implementing the SDG Global Indicator Framework. Also, we have the mandate by the member states from the Agenda 2030 that request this IEG develop this SDG indicator framework. So the main task of this group is basically, besides of the indicator framework, they also will provide technical support for the implementation and also regular review the methodological development and the indicator and their metadata, and also regular review the capacity building activities together with this another group established by the Statistical Commission, which is called the High-Level Group on Partnership, Capacity Building, and Coordination on Statistical for SDGs. So this group consists of currently 27 regular members and also 1 active official of the Statistical Commission chair. And this 28-member total were selected by the regional mechanism. So the regional commissions actually selected this, the experts from the National Statistical Office for this group. So a little bit background of the development. So from June 2015 to February 2016, this group has went through many rounds of open consultation, internal consultation, and on this indicator framework. So involve all stakeholders, and I think maybe someone heard of at one point we have this color-coded indicator, like the red, yellow, green indicators, and then we already the many like open consultation on these different like color-coded indicators. So by March 2016, the group finalized the initial set of the global indicator framework and proposed to the 47th session of the Statistical Commission. And as a commission, the commission agreed as a practical starting point with the proposed global indicator framework. As a reflect, but it also has some subject to further technical refinement. And in June 2016, the ECOSOC took note of the report of the Statistical Commission, and which included the global indicator framework. So the other decisions made by the Statistical Commission in 2016 also include the Commission recognized that the development of the indicator framework is a technical process which need to continue over time. And they also emphasize that the global indicators are intended for global follow-up review of the 2030 agenda. An indicator for regional, national, and subnational level of monitoring will be developed at the regional and national levels. We said that, but we already heard in a lot of countries they actually start from this global indicator framework, and then they developed their national indicator framework. And the Commission also stressed that implementation of the indicator framework will present a challenging in many countries. As we heard from last year, the HLPF, the main challenge is the data. So we know the Commission also said the effort need to strengthen national statistical capacity will be needed, and especially for the developing countries, Africa country, LDC, LDCNCs, and other countries in special situation, and also agree that the coordination between national statistical system and international organizations is very important, including to ensure transparency and efficiency in reporting and avoid duplication, and that attention should be given to strengthen reporting capacity of poor countries. So let's look at the current indicator framework agreed by the Commission last year. So the agreed indicator framework currently contains 230 indicators addressing each and every one of the goals and the target of the agenda. And to facilitate the implementation of the indicator framework, the IEG SDG group established a tier classification for the indicator framework. So there are 3 tiers. The tier 1 indicator is the indicator is conceptually clear, with established methodology and standards available, and data are regularly produced by countries. And tier 2 indicator is conceptually clear, with established methodology and standards, but data not regularly produced by country. And tier 3 indicator, there are no established methodology or standard available. A methodology or standard are being developed or tested for the indicator. So we want to emphasize that this tier classification is purely for facilitating implementation, and all the indicators are equally important, because some people have the misconception that the tier classification, the indicator has a different classes, but that's not true. It's purely for the implementation. And based on the current status, there's about 65% of tier 1 and tier 2 indicators, and there are about 35% of tier 3 indicators. So the work carried out by the IEG group in last year in 2016, mainly the proposal for refinement of indicator to the 48th session of the Statistical Commission. So that currently in the last year, the group reviewed about the 10 indicators that need to be refined. This indicator, the refinement proposal was submitted to the upcoming Statistical Commission in March, and the report of this group is available on the Statistical Commission website. If you're interested in which indicator has been refined, you can take a look. I think it is the Annex Annex 4 of the report. And then the group also proposed a plan for future review of the indicator framework to the Statistical Commission. Basically, the group decided there's two comprehensive review in the period of the SDG. In the SDG period, the first comprehensive review will happen in 2020, and the second comprehensive review will happen in 2025. And the group also, with the help of we call the custodian agency of the indicator, developed a work plan for Tier 3 indicators. We're currently updating this Tier 3 indicator work plan. I think it will be available as a background document to the Statistical Commission report. This report will be available, I think, today or tomorrow. And currently we have almost all Tier 3 indicator work plan except for 4 or 5, I think we're missing, which is we call the orphan indicator, which do not have a custodian agencies. And also in last year, the group have collected metadata for Tier 1 and Tier 2 indicator. This metadata available on the USD website, the metadata repository, and I'll have the web link at the last slide of my presentation, so you can go to take a look of the metadata. And we'll also keep updating this metadata and work plan and continuously. And in the last year, also the group create 3 working groups, and one on SDMX, which is data and metadata exchange standards, and one on geospatial information, and one on interlinkage. So this different working group carried out their works and report back to the IEG SDG. And there's another work stream on this data disaggregation of this IEG group, and this work stream is currently working on the guidance on the data disaggregation. And the group also agreed on the global reporting mechanism and also discussed the data flow from national to international level. That's the work was conducted by this group in 2016. Moving forward to the this coming years, so the group will work on, we will have this work program proposed to the Statistical Commission in March. Once it's approved, the group will work on establish procedure for the review of work plan for Tier 3 indicators, and finalize a mechanism for moving indicator from one tier to another, and also start the process of review possible additional indicators and submit a proposal for additional indicator for consideration by the Statistical Commission at its 49th session in 2018. And this additional indicator, we already identify which aspect of the target need additional indicators. Additional indicator also included in the annex of the Statistical Commission report. There's about 30 to 33 additional indicators identified by this group possible. So we'll do a consultation on this additional indicators in the coming years. And this group also will review the data availability for Tier 1, Tier 2 indicators, and develop a plan for increasing the data coverage of Tier 2 indicator with a joint, there's a subgroup of expert group with a high-level group for partnership, coordination, and capacity building for statistics. And the group will also develop further guidelines on the issue of data disaggregation, and we'll continue working on the 3 working groups. And we'll have 2 physical meetings, and one is at the end of March, which is 20th to 31st of March in Canada, in Ottawa. And the second meeting will be in the second half of 2017. We haven't decided the date yet. So this is like a quick summary of the work conducted by this IEG and SDG group in the last 2 years. And besides that, I would like to also mention that given by the mandate of the 2030 agenda, the statistical division also leading on the global SDG global report. So we have basically two reports. One report is we call the parliamentary report, which will be served as a background document to the HLPF. Another one we call the glossary report, which is a more user-friendly publication, which will be launched at the HLPF. Like we had this report last year, and we'll continue this report annually. And this is a website of IAG SDGs, where you can find the latest tier classification, which we updated on the 23rd of December, and also the latest Tier 3 work plan and the Statistics Commission report and all the other informations. Thank you.
Young-Yi, thank you very much for this very comprehensive update on where we are with the SDG indicators. A couple of takeaways. I think, and I've seen this, the development of SDG indicators follows a very structured process with very strong engagement of government. It's a very strong intergovernmental process with also heavy involvement of the UN. I say this because you know, it's important for especially colleagues working at the country level that when you're working on issues of SDG reviewing, whether it's supporting VNRs in the HLPF or country-led SDG reports, it's important that you reach out to your national statistical offices. They've been involved in these exercises. They have a lot of information, and they will be able to help you, and especially their government counterparts on this type of work. My other takeaway, I mean, is that there's still a lot of work to be done to have indicator frameworks all over the world, and it's not only in countries in the south, it's also in the north. You follow some of the discussions, and you got all countries concerned. How are we going to measure this? So there's a lot of work, and therefore there's an opportunity for the UN to come together and support statistical capacity development, especially in those countries where the capacities are lower. In the UN, there's a lot of knowledge and expertise. Reach out to colleagues at the regional level. The regional economic commissions are well known for their statistical knowledge. At the global level, you've got the statistical division, you've got a network, interagency network, or agencies have very specialized knowledge on areas of their concern. So please reach out, and hopefully we can make this happen better. Then, just again, encourage, as Young-Yi mentioned at the end, to go to that website of the IAG. There's a lot of information. You can almost follow the conversations and the discussions that member states had in the development of the SDG indicator framework. So, having said that, we go now to the second part. I'll go to the second part. Let me just read some. Sorry, I'll go to the second part of our webinar. It will have to be a bit shorter than we have planned. Just maybe go through some of the questions that are here. Maybe my colleague Alex Fries here will sort of come up with some summary questions, try to capture what is the essence of your concerns, and then, as we said at the beginning, we'll go through the questions at a later stage and try and answer any more specific issues. So, Alex, please.
Colleagues, I'm just going to pick or summarize a couple of questions, and I think we will try to go through all of them and answer as many as we can also after the webinar. From my capture from all the questions I see here, maybe I pick out one for each of the presenters. The first one would be maybe for Fred and Babatunde to answer. There's a couple of questions around the mandatory nature of the voluntary national reviews and vis-a-vis their relationship to the SDG country reports. So how do they relate to each other? Is one of them mandatory or not? That maybe is one question for Fred and Babatunde. There is another one maybe for Amre, for the regional. Maybe just summarize the four, and then we can go through them.
Yeah,
and
please,
maybe for Amre, there's a couple of questions on what is a good way to prepare for the regional fora, how to reach out to government, national government, maybe in preparation, and also if there are any other events, workshops in preparation for the regional fora. Then maybe, I think an interesting question maybe for Young-Yi is around if there is any strategy from the statistics division or statistical commission strategy for building the capacity of national statistical offices. I see a couple of those. So maybe I stop here, let the presenters answer while we go through the questions and identify a couple more issues. Maybe Babatunde, Fred first, and then Amre, and then Yongyi.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, colleagues. Basically, in terms of this process, when you look at the intergovernmental negotiations that took place before Agenda 2030 was finalized and endorsed in 2015, the 2030 agenda requires that all review process should apply certain principles. One of the principles, which I think is really important to emphasize, is that the review processes should be voluntary and country-led. That is to say, countries are not going to be penalized if they don't produce SDG national reports in any way. But we are encouraging countries to actually produce SDG country reports for many reasons. Because it would help countries to focus on the universality of the agenda, the integrated agenda, as well as interrelated goals and targets, including means of implementation, so that countries will be able to see the progress that they are making. And as I said during my presentation, during the MDG era, many countries actually produced MDG reports. We said that 550 MDG reports were produced by 156 countries during the MDG era, which means that many countries saw the value in producing national reports in order to have accountability mechanisms, but also to see the progress that they are making. Going again through the principles that govern follow-up and review processes. One other principle, apart from these review processes being voluntary and country-led, the second principle is that the review processes should be focused on universal, integrated, and interrelated goals and targets, which means it's important for countries to actually try and produce SDG country reports. The third principle is the long-term orientation of the agenda. This is an agenda for a 15-year period, which means for a 15-year period, countries will want to see the progress that they are making. And then they want to also compare themselves, you know, whether they are doing well or not. So compare to whom? Particularly to countries that are in their income categories or that are at the different, the same level of stage of development. Principle 4, in terms of follow-up and review processes, is that there should be open, inclusive, participatory, and transparency in terms of how the review processes will take place, so that all people will be involved. This requires, of course, producing country reports. The final principle is that Agenda 2030 requires that review processes must be people-centered, gender-sensitive, and show respect, protect, and promote human rights with a particular focus on the people who are poorest, most vulnerable, and those that are left behind. So, and that, to know all of this, to disaggregate data by all relevant characteristics, is important to produce regular country reports. The case of example, the example that comes to mind is the example of South Africa, where I remember that almost every 2 years, they produce MDG country reports, led by the National Statistical Office, Statistics South Africa, which was used to actually inform policy dialogue in the country. Thank you.
Good. Okay. This is Fred. Let me sort of complement what Babatunde said. You know, of course, the voluntary nature is at the heart, because given how broad this agenda is, it's a case of countries, of course, being asked to step forward voluntarily. But at the same time, as has been said before, to build comparability and consistency, we have the guidelines. And on the one hand, of course, I would say, in my view, it characterizes more conceptual, what Babatunde has discussed, the country reporting guidelines. You know, how do you go about? What are the elements? What are the how-tos? And you want to do when you're doing a report, a voluntary review at the national level. So as we've said, that's something which should be ongoing. Countries have the full freedom to discuss, to do that and structure that as they wish. Countries have different constitutional setups, different governmental setups. So each country does its national review and accountability processes differently. But the idea in the agenda is, and that's why the paragraph in the agenda is quite short, that the UN doesn't pry its nose into how governments do that, but we want to encourage and foster that. So That's the idea that at the global level, of course, the UN has a bigger role. We have a more detailed expansion in the HRPF and so on. But the point, nonetheless, very strongly that we want to have robust national review processes, and that the SDG country reporting guidelines are a sort of a how-to for the UN system to help countries carry that out. And then, if that's done well, as it should be, that builds and sets the stage for the global level reporting. And for the global level reporting to ensure comparability when we get to the HRPF, we have the Secretary General's guidelines, which in a sense are not so much conceptual as they are more of a content outline of what the report to the HRPF should look like. I saw a few questions, but I want to just briefly touch on one being about good practices. What have we seen coming so far? One good practice is high-level commitment. The more high-level commitment is in the government that leads this process, the better, whether it's in the Prime Minister's office, whether it's a clearly identified coordinating entity or agency which has support from the highest levels of government. That's been key. The other part is strong involvement of stakeholders, bringing this in, making this an agenda which in some sense is whole of government, even whole of society. And this is difficult. This is about communication. We mentioned earlier using modern communication tools to really bring this message of the SDGs out beyond the bubble of the government or the UN system. I mean, that's really something which countries are struggling with. Another one is the private sector. We've had this come up a few times, is how do we involve the private sector in the implementation of the agenda? And that's something where there's still more work needs to be done, because this comes up again and again, and we don't have any clear answers there. So that's something which is a developing area for a good practice. I saw a question also, what's the value of a VNR? What is the value of doing it? It's an enormous commitment of resources. Done properly, this is a commitment on the part of busy government officials, and of course on the part of the UN system supporting them in the developing countries. Why do this? And one message we've heard is, of course, this is an opportunity to showcase lessons learned for the country to come to the international level and see and show how it's doing at the national level, its review process, its strengths. But beyond that, the more concrete part we've heard is that countries have actually benefited because this gives the impetus to bring government departments and agencies together which don't normally work with each other. It fosters, in fact, enforces a level of cooperation and collaboration. So the international process kind of brings and knocks heads together in a productive way to help things get done at the national. I think that's something which we shouldn't underestimate. I think it was mentioned earlier too, is the fact that it fosters what we always talk about, integration. It fosters that integration and collaboration. Thank you.
All right, so I will address actually some questions that I actually observed also online related to the regional commissions and to the regional forum on sustainable development. Two of them are actually of information nature and actually of kind of, so I will just, there was an observation, rightly so actually, that there is no mention of ESCO and the Arab region countries actually in the, on some of the slides, all right? And on that actually I think the observation is correct. I think this is really related to the fact that apparently, I mean, that's opted in your slide actually for regional political groupings, all right, at the UN, which are actually not aligned at all, I must confess, with what the regional commission's configuration is, nor what the regional bureau of UNDP is or the regional UNDG is. I think we need to address this at the global level. We all know, and obviously Cyprus is not Asia Pacific, but that's something else. But I mean, in the most important thing that there are two countries from the Arab region, members of ESCO, which is Qatar and Jordan, who are actually going with their PNRs for the 2017. ESCO is going to be also working with them closely with us in the preparation of their voluntary national reviews, but we'll work, I guess, on the harmonization of the regions with our colleagues in DESA at the global level. This is on the information aspect. Another clarification was about the regional VNR workshops versus the regional forum on sustainable development. The regional VNR workshops are of technical nature, actually, and they are actually going to be done back-to-back exactly with the regional forum on sustainable development. So just a day probably before the regional forum on sustainable development is launched, the regional commissions are convening these regional workshops for those governments who are actually of the regions who are doing the VNRs. They are going to be, as I say, of technical nature, to kind of an induction, if you wish, to review what what's going to happen, how the representation is going to be happen, and also to kind of fine-tune the national reviews which are going to be on the table. So it's kind of limited only to those governments which are going to present in the regional forum on sustainable development. So it's kind of a preparatory for the regional forum from the technical aspects, if you wish, from that perspective. The broader questions actually is related to how can the UN country teams, and this related to a question on ECA and regional forum in Africa, and also other from Turkmenistan, there was a question also how we get involved and how we can help, etc. I think this is really related to the active role of, depends on the UN country team's involvement in the process, obviously, and its involvement with the country concerned, I must say. There are 40+ countries, obviously, which are going to go ahead with their VNRs. Actually, 12 of them are developed countries, if you wish, so at least there are 30+ countries, all right, in the various developing regions, all right, 7 in Africa, for instance, 11 in Latin America and the Caribbean, 9+ in the Asia Pacific, 2 in the Arab region, as I mentioned. So it's really up to each UN country team. Well, first, the information is on the website, so identify these countries if you don't know them yet. Obviously, I assume you know them, all right? And then see your involvement with the government concerned, all right? Whether they seek your help on that. I personally think, and this is a question also, there should be a link between the SDG report support and obviously the VNR. I mean, there has to be kind of this horizontal linkage, obviously, and they have to build on each other, honestly. So this is up to the UN country teams. I believe that the regional UNDG teams should have a role, obviously, in this, all right, in kind of, their main role is to provide support to the UN country teams, all right, and this is kind of exactly the type of support that I would envisage from the regional UNDG to the UN country teams in terms of plugging them into this process and establishing this coherence at the national level, honestly, with the government concerned. We are going, as I said, from the regional commissions to work with the regional UNDG. They are actually aware of these plans. All right, we're going to be ensuring, and I think we hope that the regional UNDG will bring this information to the UN country teams. But actually, many of my colleagues in the regional commissions are going to be also directly involved with the UN country teams on that aspect. But I must say that our direct, obviously, involvement, you would understand, will be with the governments, and the UN country team support should come to the government at the national level in this bottom-up approach. So I just want to clarify that from the perspective of the regional commissions. Thank you.
Dunya, would you like to say a few words on the issue that Alex raised?
Yes, I just want to mention the question is on the strategies on the statistical capacity building. As I mentioned that in 2005, there's another group which we call the high-level group for partnership, capacity building and coordination for statistical for the 2030 agenda. So this group had a role of developing a global action plan for sustainable development data. And I don't know if you have heard of this. We just held the first World Data Forum in Cape Town like a few weeks ago. And through that, the outcome of this World Data Forum is the Cape Town Global Action Plan for sustainable development data. This is to provide a roadmap for the modernization and the strengthening of the statistical system. And so this Cape Town Global Action Plan will be proposed to the upcoming Statistical Commission for approval. And besides that, we also work with other regional commissions and to develop a regional work plan. I think for most of the region, there's also already exist regional roadmaps, and all is currently developing a regional roadmap for sustainable development data. And then we also have many developer account projects with the regional commissions and other UN agencies to assist in the capacity buildings. And this is a nutshell. And also the IAG, the NHLG has a joint working group mainly focused on the Tier 2 indicator to increase the data availability for the Tier 2 indicators. Then on thematic areas, the agency also work on to increase the capacity building for like each thematic areas. Thanks.
Cindy?
Yeah.
Yes, actually,
from the regional commissions, please.
Yeah, I actually saw another question about again, some concern about possible or potential duplication between the VNRs at the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development and the High-Level Political Forum, which I did emphasize from the very beginning in my presentations that this is not the intention whatsoever. They are not substitutes and there is no duplication. And the way that, as I said, I mean, we see it actually as a process, a building up process. First, all the regional forums are going to be from end of March till mid-May, all right? This is actually really like 3 months only before the July, if you wish, HLPF. So I saw the concerns also as kind of procedure about concerns on the countries to expedite the reports and so on and so forth. I mean, the issue here is that the regional, first, this is a mandate by some regional commissions, by some member states. The members of the regions commissions actually, as Alex said, see great value in the peer learning at the regional level. Colombia wants to know how it stands vis-a-vis Mexico, for instance, all right, before it knows how it stands vis-a-vis Uganda, for instance. They kind of have similar context, they have similar issues and so on. So that's important for them in terms of peer learning with their peers at the region, all right? Secondly, as I said, this VNR is not only a sounding platform, as rightly said, in terms of enriching and bringing us other perspective, but also we hope that through this, some regional and transboundary perspectives could come in this VNR and how this affect also, all right, this drive at the national level sometimes to implement, how regional cooperation, for instance, can assist in the implementation and the acceleration of the 2030 agenda through regional integration efforts, through other aspects of transboundary nature and so on. And then there are also kind of extrapolations that could be kind of made, if you wish, all right, depending, most of the Latin American countries are middle-income countries, for instance, all right? So they share this kind of status, if you wish, of situation. Many of the African countries are LDCs, so they have this, which can be kind of, as I say, extrapolated through the situation of the country through kind of better trends and gaps and so on. So we see a value added, obviously, and this member states, more importantly, obviously, so a value added of this. The intention is no duplication whatsoever. And it's not expected that they will come to the regional forum with a final report. As a matter of fact, as I say, we hope that they would use this platform to enrich their VNRs at the end of the global level. Thank you.
So this is Alex Rodriguez. Let me just finish the webinar with one last question to some of the speakers, which I think picks up some of the concerns that the participants have expressed. Is what resources, what support is being provided, specific resource, especially for those sort of more immediate output, whether it's the preparation of VNRs, the preparation of SDG country reports. I mean, I know the statistical division, Yong-Yi has already talked about all the capacity developments and initiatives that are there. That's more sort of longer term, that we know there, but any specific things which are immediately available that country teams can make use of? Just a couple of minutes, maybe Fred, I know that this has some missions to support VNRs. Just very quickly, what are they? And then maybe Babatung and then Ifan. Please, Fred.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Alex. So first, I would say we'll give another shout out to our website, but also more specifically the synthesis report. It's about 60 pages. It covers very quickly the main headlines and main messages from the 2016 reports. So as I said, those are really a wonderful resource. You have them synthesized and summarized for you in this report. It also picks out some of the capacity building issues, some of the challenges countries have experienced. So it goes, I think, to answer some of the questions that those who are going to be supporting governments this year, maybe next year, might be having. It's a good resource, I think, to get a handle on what this VNR side of this follow-up and review architecture is all about. I think it's a good, quick study. Secondly, our colleagues in the UN system, the UN Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR, ran an online course, a training course for on the VNRs, and they aim to run another course. Some of the countries that are reporting this year have participated. We've got good reviews from them, so there's some online research and online training going on. I'm sure there are other courses that are being run by other organizations out there that are stepping in. There was mention of, in Babatuni's presentation, of the scorecard. So we have the people at Columbia University, the Jeff Sachs group is developing data and other things. So there's a lot of information out there that's being built around what we're doing at the UN. Others are also stepping in to fill gaps and develop supplemental information. But I would first commend to you this synthesis report and this online training that UNITAR has developed, and that's out there. And we do also have at DESA, as of course at UNDP2, some capacity development resources that can be tapped. So that's also just a direct contact to us. There is some assistance available for countries that are undergoing the VNRs. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues. From UNDP side, we are basically supporting countries that are our program countries that are producing the voluntary national report this year. A message has gone out from our bureau director, the ASG Magdi, to all these countries to basically prepare a short proposal and request for up to $20,000 for support to the voluntary national reports. At the same time, for these same countries, we have requested those who are willing to prepare SDG country reports for this year to also submit a short proposal of $30,000. So overall, we have already received a lot of proposals from countries. We have extended the deadline for submitting proposals until February 20. If your country is in this particular category, feel free, submit a proposal to us, and then we can actually take a look at all of this and provide financial support. But at the same time, we are providing technical support in many ways. At UNDP, we have what we call the MAPS missions. We have created a global technical support team, whereby we have selected certain countries where we go to based on extensive consultations to provide integrated support in terms of what should be done around the SDGs, how to do the mainstreaming, how to do the acceleration, policy support, which will also include issues around financing, but also issues around monitoring and reporting of the SDGs. Last year, we had 9 of those missions to countries like Tajikistan, Sudan, Djibouti, Liberia, Guinea, Cambodia, and others. This year, we plan to do 40 of such missions where we make available integrated missions, cutting across our BEX expertise from our regional ops and also from our headquarters to support countries technically in terms of what should be done moving forward around the SDG implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. From the Regional Commission.
Yeah, no, very quickly. Well, obviously, all the information on the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development some are available already on the respective websites, but mainly also if you want to go to our one-shop window is on the regionalcommissions.org website, which is the website of actually my office at the global level, where we are posting immediately the links to all the respective regional forum on sustainable development, and this kind of is a window for all the countries if they wish involved to know the information and so on. But I think as we move forward, I think obviously we need to work here as well with the colleagues. Like I think I'm going to be approaching Magdi as well to see how best to kind of synchronize really the regional and the national level in terms of the VNRs to ensure that this nexus is very strong. So I think it's a good point from the participants, and I think we'll really need to work that in details. Thank you.
Yoongi, is there anything?
Yeah, so one day I saw some question on the where the global action plan, and where you can find is the undataforum.org, where you can find the Cape Town Global Action Plan, or you can find it in the current Statistical Commission website of this document. On the capacity building, I think currently we carry out development account project with 3 countries in Africa, 3 countries. And in Asia, that's only one part of the development account project. But this year, we have a lot of country missions. We have a different project which involves more than 20 countries. We have a development account 10 project, which also has a capacity building workshop for many also other countries.
Thank you, Yoongi. And this is only just a snippet of what is out there. I mean, Fred alluded to UNITA. I know the UN Staff College is also doing a lot of work, a lot of support on SDGs and also on these issues, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and then all the agencies, funds and programs. I mean, in their specific areas of expertise, there's a lot of capacity, a lot of resources. It's about reaching out. I think there's an underlying concern here, which is the concern that we all have that this could lead to some overlap. But it's really up to us. I mean, I think around the table we're convinced that all there is a very strong rationale to work together, potential for lots of synergies, and it's really up to us to work together and to make this happen. So Having said this, I would like to probably bring to a closure the webinar. We've just gone 3 minutes beyond the time that we had set ourselves. First of all, thank the speakers who came here today, Fred, Babatunde, Yongyi, also to the technical support from Alex, Fries, and Peter. And then especially thank all the participants. And we've maintained a very high level of participation who've come to and listened into this webinar. We see this as a starting point. We will be having a look at the questions, making sure that we don't leave anything unanswered, find a way of providing any additional feedback information back to you, making available all the resources, the links, so you have all this information there for you. But just remember, we operate in an open door policy. Reach out to any of us, and we will be more than happy, I think, to support you in whatever way we can. So having said that, thank you very much, and have a good day or good evening. Goodbye, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. The last comment.